All right, hello everybody, and welcome. Today we've got a little more Japanese stuff for you today because I remembered about these books, but I didn't mention them in any of my other videos about Japanese study. So, what I'm going to show you today are two books. Number one, a dictionary of basic Japanese grammar, and number two, a dictionary of intermediate Japanese grammar. These are the two that I own. There's an advanced one as well, but I have found very little reason to need anything other than these two. Now, I know I've said before that it's helpful to get like a like a text like a college level textbook kind of for Japanese study, because what it'll help you do is it'll help you work your way into grammar and it'll help you work your way into vocabulary at the same time, right? I mentioned the Genki series earlier. But these are actually kind of useful because they basically have almost any like grammatical pattern in Japanese that you can think of. And then they describe it, and not only do they describe it, but they also include a large number of examples. So, for example, we've got the entry ato de here. Basically, I'll just read from it so I don't screw it up. But ato means after or later, right? And so, ato de is a conjunction. It means that some state or action takes place at a time, not always immediately, after some other state or action has taken place. It's related to tara or tekara. It's antonymical to mae ni. So there's that kind of useful information, right? But what's really cool about this book is how many different examples there are for each of these things and how many different formations they show you. For instance, they have a complete sentence here. Mason-san wa Nihon e itta ato de byoki ni natta or byoki ni narimashita, right? And they break it down into they diagram the sentences for you, which is really, really handy. So you can see, Mason-san wa is the topic, subject. Nihon e itta ato de, subordinate clause, after he went to Japan, right? Byoki ni narimashita, that's the predicate. He became ill, right? Now, that, as far as it goes, that's kind of the natural thing you would expect to find in a grammatical dictionary, right? Not that I guess I don't know, but I don't know of a lot of languages where you can get these really good grammatical dictionaries. But these books exist for Japanese and English, and I don't know, or for Japanese from English, right? The book is written mostly in English, or for an English audience. But the thing that I did, and you'll notice that there's these two index cards in here as a bookmark. There's so many good examples, and they're so like laser focused on a particular entry that this is actually a really good way to practice speaking if you don't have like a speech partner. Because these examples are very simple, as long as you have the pronunciation basically down, there's a lot here where you can just basically say, what these two things meant is, the first one was how far have I read in the dictionary and studied, and the second one is how far have I actually read aloud all the Japanese. And so that was kind of a project that I had going on a little while back, where I was kind of going through this and just saying everything out loud, trying to just get the muscle memory, in the tongue and in the mouth, right? Because one of those things about studying a new language, right, especially speaking, I don't know about you, but I have trouble, I can come up with sentences in my head, but that's still kind of slow, right? But then if I don't have practice like actually saying the words, then what happens is that I can't translate the sentence in my head to my mouth in a reasonable time frame either, and so it gets even slower. And so this book, with all of its hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of little examples, including full sentences, including isolated examples we've got the relative clause here. Dareka, how do I do this? So you have even partial sentences, or if I can find, there's even stuff where it's just like the word and the thing that it goes with, right? And so you can practice. You can just be like, watashi tachi, anata tachi, kare tachi, kanojo tachi, kare ra, kanojo ra. You can just kind of practice saying these things and get that that muscle memory in your face, right? This one I haven't spent too much time with, but it's got the same kind of structure as the Dictionary of Basic Japanese Grammar, just covers more stuff. And the same thing is true of the advanced one. But like here, you've got entries like sasuga or se, who's like, okay, let's see if I can get to the se, a dependent noun expressing a cause which brings about an undesirable result. So there's a lot in here about like connotations, because there are a lot of structures in Japanese that unless you know about them, have a particular connotation. This is a bad thing. This is a good thing. This is what I expected. This is what I didn't expect. And these dictionaries do a really good job of explaining what those connotations are as well, which I think is really handy. The basic book that I talked about earlier was the Particle Dictionary, right? Which again, fantastic little book, but like. These from the Japan Times are the Particle Dictionary on steroids. Basically, anything that you want to know about Japanese grammar, any construction almost that you can think of, is going to be in one of these. And if it's not, then you're probably not speaking, idiomatic Japanese, and you should probably reconsider your sentence, right? It's a really like I don't know how I can describe it, but like if I can just get the stupid dust cover off because I don't want to damage it. Come on. It's a really dense book. Like, I'm just going to kind of, like, just tons and tons of examples and ideas and words and methods and stuff like that. There's just so much in this book that, like, despite the fact that it's this tiny little... I guess it's a fairly small book. I mean, it's thick, it's chunky, right? But it's not super like big and tall, right? Like I have an unabridged dictionary, and that thing is a monster. But this handles a lot of really good grammar, and because there are so many examples from full sentences to like simple, repeat after me. This is also really good for speaking practice if you don't have a partner to speak with, because you can just use these examples. You can swap words out at will, especially since they're like diagrammed in the sentences, right? We can take Mason-san and turn him into, Kon-san, right? Stuff like that. So these are just two books that I hadn't mentioned yet because they were over on my shelf over here, and I forgot that they were under a bunch of papers. But I figured that it was worth mentioning these two because they're actually really, really good. Just to give you guys a couple more minutes of this. Let's look at the. So they have introductions which give you definitions, like what parts of speech are and stuff like that. Grammatical terms, characteristics of Japanese grammar. Very instructive, very accessible, and then everything is. They even have. Oh, you'll love this. Let's see if I can point at it here. This guy. They even have like a breakdown of all the different forms of watashi and what they imply basically. You have watashi, which is formal. You have formal female. You have informal female. You have very informal or vulgar female. You have informal older male, washi, right? I'm almost there. There's all kinds of great stuff in here. You can look into like the differences between hoshi and verb tai, right? These are different things. And then there's verb tagaru, which is even something which is similar but used in a slightly different way from tai. Because in English you just say I want you to do this or I want this. You can put a verb phrase, or you can put a noun in front of want. But in Japanese, it's not quite that simple. They've got a couple of different ways to say that, and there are cultural reasons why you don't say it one way in certain circumstances versus another, right? You don't... usually it's impolite to use tagaru for some other person, except in like really informal settings. But so you would have to use like verb te hoshi usually, but even that's not really particularly like acceptable, you usually put it in the form of a request, like kudasai, basically, right? But like this book is gonna cover a lot of that for you if you go through it. And since it's all done alphabetically, as in romanization, it's pretty quick to look things up without having to like iu e o ka ki, right? You don't have to think about it in Japanese terms. You can just go and say, it starts with an S or an S sound. So we'll go to shiru, subject or someone gets information from some outside source, right? To get to know, related to wakaru. 日本のことを知っていますか? Do you know about Japan? はい、知っています。知っています。Or いいえ、知りません. They have the polite forms, they have the informal forms. 木下さんを知っていますか? As you can see, I haven't practiced that much with it recently, but like, this is a really good place to just get lots of like example sentences to try speaking, if you don't have someone to talk to. And more than that, it's also extremely useful as a reference for Japanese grammar because, like I said, one of the things about Japanese grammar is that it says that there's a lot of different like ordering in Japanese compared to English. And so one of the things you can do is you'll come up with a sentence in English, and it'll be some complex sentence, right? It'll have a clause here and a clause there and something else here. And it can be very like confusing or difficult to convert that into Japanese because in idiomatic Japanese you wouldn't structure the sentence that way. And so what you generally have to do is you have to start thinking in different terms, different grammatical terms, different natural orderings of things. And these books can help you kind of push yourself in that direction because they'll give you, if you want to say, I learned about quantum physics yesterday, right? That's a simple sentence, so that's not a good example. But like, I learned about quantum physics yesterday, and the double slit experiment is really confusing to me. You might phrase that a little bit differently in Japanese than you would in English. So, yeah, these are really solid little books. They are useful as grammar references, and it's not just grammar, right? Because in English we have kind of a limited sense of what grammar is, a fairly narrow sense of what grammar is. It's, this word goes here, this word goes there. We don't have a lot of particles. We have conjunctions, but there's only a couple of them. In Japanese, there are a lot of chunks of language that act as conjunctions, act as that are particles that go between or signify what part of a sentence a word is, right, or phrase. And, English grammar is relatively simple, but Japanese grammar, maybe I'm just saying that because I'm a native English speaker, I don't know. But it seems like English grammar is relatively simple by comparison, or at least what we consider grammar and don't take off as like syntax or vocabulary seems to be fairly limited in scope, right? And if you just made a dictionary of what we call grammar in English, it would probably be a lot shorter than these books, and then there's the advanced one too, right? And so there's a lot in here that isn't that we wouldn't call English grammar in English, right? Just trying to think of a really good example, like the shitemasu ka, right? That's just how someone says I know something, right? But it's in here because it's important to know the difference between what you shiru, what you know in that sense, and wakaru, what you understand, because those are two different words in Japanese and they're used in different ways. And so it's important to have, especially for a non-native speaker of Japanese, right? It's important to have something that gives you those differences. So yeah, if you want something to help you like learn more grammatical formulations in Japanese, if you want something to give you a lot of really good examples for things to like read out loud, or even just to read quietly, right? You can certainly do that too. But there's so many short little quick examples here that you can kind of use these books to practice once you've got pronunciation kind of down. And you can go as slow or as fast as you want, which is the other nice thing, right? You don't have some audio file that's blah, 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 really, really fast. And you're like, right? You can go slow, you can pronounce it slowly, you can practice, you can get faster at it, because as an English speaker, there's a tendency to take shortcuts in Japanese pronunciation, right? Like, how do I put this? If you might notice that I sound a little bit different when I'm trying to speak Japanese style. I could just totally go with a blunt American accent, shitemasu ka, right? And pronounce things a little bit more dumpily. But like, the shorter the example, the easier it is to pronounce it, and just having all these examples kind of helps you square what you're hearing with what you can say, with what you can produce vocally. And there are some pronunciation differences between, English and Japanese. Like the rarirurero sound is a little bit different in Japanese than anything that we really have in English. There's the hu, which is, we don't really have any, like, well, maybe we, we don't have a lot of, like, just breathy, like, we have like th, right, in English, but like, if you were to, in fact, they romanize hu as f and then u, right? But it's not really an f sound. It's not f, right, where you get your teeth on your lip like that. Your teeth stay apart and your lips purse, and it's more like just like a slightly forceful blowing. I don't know why I got into pronunciation, but the point is that that's why I got in. Okay, I'm trying to remember. If you're going to try to speak Japanese in a reasonably non-accented way, which you should strive for if you're learning the language, right? In the same way that you don't just like lazily pronounce like Spanish words or whatever, right? You try to get the accents right. You try to get the pronunciation to sound more native, because it's a little bit, the structure is different. With this, you can practice. With these two books, you can practice a ton of little language examples, and when you're not practicing language examples, you can be looking up actual useful grammar rules. And like I said, their definition of grammar for these books is extremely broad. Otherwise, the books would be pretty narrow, because it would just include the particles and word order and stuff like that. But these actually have lots and lots of little cultural details that you're going to want to know the difference between shiru and wakaru, for instance. So yeah, I'm surprised I forgot about these, because they were literally sitting like within arm's length, but they have a bunch of papers on top of them. And I was like, where do those books go? And I found them this morning. So I figured this would be fun to talk about. Like, they have stuff about verb conjugation as well. They even have like for instance, look at this one. Yeah. Oi. This is just an adjective. Like, it has no business in a grammar dictionary. If we were talking about like an English grammar dictionary, you wouldn't have a separate entry in an English grammar dictionary for the word many. But that's all that this really is. Many, a lot of, or much. It gives you oze and takusan. It's related to both of those. It's antonymical to sukunai, right? Nihon ni wa daigaku ga oi desu. In Japan, literally, in Japan, universes are many. Equals, there are a lot of universities in Japan. That's also another cool thing that they have, is that they have like the literal translation and then the kind of the localized translation. And you can see how the localized translations kind of flow a little bit better, or sound a little bit more like natural English, right? That's another thing that is true of Japanese. Again, it doesn't have the same word order that English does for even simple sentences, and therefore you're going to want to pay attention to how those sentences are structured and how those sentences would be structured differently in English, right? Subject, verb, object English versus subject, object, verb Japanese. So anyway, two great little chunky books. These are not Kodansha. These are Japan Times. So it's a different publisher than the ones that I talked about earlier. But I've found these really handy. Whenever I'm confused about something for like translation, I can always look up stuff. This is another good place to look things up, I guess, right? Because you have dictionaries just to like look up what the word means. But sometimes you want to know how it's used and why it's being used in this particular way. There's a lot of weird, oh yeah, this part of language got used this way in Japanese for some reason, and it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but here you go. Nagara is an example of that. Let's see if I can find that real quick, actually. Nagara. There it is. Yeah, nagara. A conjunction which indicates that the action expressed by the preceding verb takes place concurrently or simultaneously with the action expressed in the main clause. Now, this one really confuses me, right? Because in English, you would say, you could say, I was eating while I walked, or you can say, I walked while I was eating, right? Or, you know, let's walk while we talk, or let's talk while we walk. You could say both of those things in English and it would kind of pretty well get across. In Japanese, that's not actually true, because one of these actions is generally the primary action, and the other action is the secondary action, and you kind of have to know which is which. And so the example sentence they give here is, Taguchi-san wa itsumo shinbun o yominagara asa gohan o tabemasu. So, Taguchi-san wa, as for Mr. Taguchi, itsumo, always, shinbun o yominagara, reads a newspaper while asa gohan o tabemasu, eating his breakfast. And if we look on the next page, we get the action expressed by vi masu nagara is always secondary to the action expressed in the main clause. Thus, in 1, B is acceptable as a response to A, but C is not. So they give you someone asking you a question. Chotto hanashi ga shitai n desu ka? I'd like to have a little talk with you, right? And then there are two things that you could answer, and one of them is grammatical and one of them is not. So B is acceptable. B is ja kohi o nominagara hanashimashou, right? Then over a cup of coffee, let's talk, right? But C is not grammatical. Ja hanashi nagara kohi o nomimashou. Let's drink a cup of coffee while talking. In English, while verbing is not always the secondary action. So you actually have to be careful about this in Japanese, or you should try to, at least, to sound more native when you actually speak to people and be better understood. I don't know. Like, I think nagara is a really good example of something that sounds like intuitive, but at the same time it has some rules that don't exist in English, and so you have to be more careful in Japanese. I'm sure there are other examples, but that was the one that came off the top of my head. That's all I've got for today. Let's see, what am I working on next? I have a surprise coming up probably next week. Right now, I'm going to be reading Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut, because I don't think I've ever read any Vonnegut, and I've always wanted to, so that's a good one. And then I just finished the 5th draft of my novel, and I think it's basically done. I'm not finding much else that I want to change, either to make it longer or to make it shorter. I wrote it pretty short, honestly, in the sense that, like, I wrote it and I was like, blah, blah, blah. I kind of halfway through my inspiration kind of like got a little bit bored, and so like it became a little bit sparse. I just barely got it over 80,000 words today. I finished the final chapter, 5th draft today, and yeah, I think I'm going to be starting to gear up to actually release that soon. What I'll probably do first is I'll get a new cover for my first novella, because the original cover is the crappy hand drawing that I did back in 11 years ago, and I wasn't any good at drawing then, and I'm not any good at drawing now. So I'm going to put an actual professional cover on that novella, and then I got to come up with a title for the novel, which is really strange because, like, I don't know, I'm not good at titles. I'm really bad at them, which is sometimes a curse and sometimes a blessing. Anyway, I don't know what tomorrow's video is going to be about. I'll try to think of something. Maybe I'll talk about... no, I don't want to overwhelm people with too many Japanese videos, but... yeah, we'll figure it out. Anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you want to support the channel, you know what to do. And yeah, have a good day, and I'll see you tomorrow.